I'm Cameron McGee, and I am an organ designer and builder, sort of, and woodworker and musician and freelance AV tech and various other things. Well, I like to play classical organ pieces, whatever I find online sheet music for that I think sounds, sonically satiating, then I will play it. My inspiration for this project was that I liked organs and I wanted one to practice on, and I had just put together this wood shop, so why not get into doing, making an organ console? So I did that and put together the sound system, and now I have an organ I can practice on. Well, the first thing that was required to build the organ was I had to have plans to woodwork it, and those were difficult to find, but I eventually found an ancient website that looked like it was made back in like the late 90s that had these high-resolution PDFs of plans to build a model. This is a model of a Wurlitzer organ, a Wurlitzer theater organ console. So I built that. I decided that it looked nice, and I couldn't find really plans to build a classical console, but at the time I was putting the plans for this together, I was more interested in theater organs anyways, which is funny because when I started playing the organ, I kind of gravitated away from the theater organ and more towards the classical organ, but I still like theater organs. But the construction entailed finding a whole bunch of parts as well as just getting the wood. The pedal board down here, it had to be sourced. This is a pedal board from a Hammond organ that that someone on eBay was parting out. The keyboards are from Amazon, just Amazon keyboards that I bandsawed the case off of and mounted in here into this wooden key cheek thing that I built. And then the thumb pistons here that you press, they're all off of organs that were being parted out. Actually, the thumb pistons I think are new old stock from Rogers organ. The toe studs down here, they're off of a retired Allen organ, and so are the swell shoes. And the lights these are just Amazon lights. This up here, this is from a company called Extra Lamp that makes like high quality brass lamps for picture frames and piano music racks and organ lights as well. The screens are touch screens just from, HP, and it runs on a 2018 Mac Mini. So putting all of that together, and every single one of these buttons had to be wired. It was like, let's see, there's 20 per manual, so 2, 4, 6, so 83 piston buttons, because there's 2 extra here and a third extra one there. So 83 piston buttons. Each getting 2 wires, which took quite a long time to do. Then they all go back here into microcontrollers, which converted into a MIDI signal, and there's a gigantic USB hub. I think there's actually multiple USB hubs inside that all the USB MIDI devices plug into. I think it is a total of 10 USB MIDI devices going into the computer and being arranged properly so that it can recognize them. And yeah, that's basically the construction of it. The rest is just the audio interface and all the cables going out to the 8-channel audio speaker system that's in here. It's entirely digital. It's run by a computer running software called Hauptwerk, or Hauptwerk, as it's, I think, in German called, which I believe in German organs is the like great manual of the organ, that the name Hauptwerk. But anyways, it's a piece of software that emulates pipes. People go around the world and sample pipe organs, pipe by pipe, very meticulously, and it takes forever. And they're very expensive to buy, but you get these different organs of sample sets and you load them onto this software, and it lets you route all these different types of pipes to whatever speakers that you want. You can have, I think up to 64 different channels of audio running at the same time. This organ is running 8. If I added a subwoofer, it would be 9. And it just gives you a lot more clarity to be able to map the pipes out to different speakers. So that's what Hauptwerk lets you do if you have a big enough interface. So it's all digital. There's no real pipes involved. It's quite complicated because in real pipe organs there's now a whole bunch of electrification as well, but if you go back to really, really old pipe organs, it's entirely mechanical and there's no electrics. So in the really old organs, you'd press a key down and it would literally move pieces of wood that would physically pull a thing out from under the pipe and let air in from someone pumping a bellows. But soon they figured out how to, make the blower electric so that you wouldn't have to be pumping it. And they changed it so that the key was electric and basically just some sort of a system to send a signal to the wind chest with the pipe in it that opens up a valve to let the air in from the blower. And I mean, this is just simulating that. There's no physical blower or chests or pipes. It's just a software program simulating the air being in the system and playing back a sample of a pipe that has been recorded when you send it a MIDI signal from the keyboard that is assigned to that manual, and whatever stops it. It functions like an organ. There's no functional difference between pulling stops on this and playing it and what an actual organ would be doing. The only difference is that there's no mechanical things moving to actually let air through a pipe. It's all just a sample of a pipe that was recorded being played back through a sound system. I would say one of the most difficult parts to get were the pedal board, the swell shoes, and the toe studs. The thumb pistons, on eBay, there's a ton of new old stock Rogers thumb pistons, so I just bought a big box of them and put them in. But the pedal board, I had to drive like 4 hours out to some guy in a barn who was salvaging this Hammond organ to get the pedals from him, and so we had to make a trip to get that. And thankfully there was like one listing each for a set of swell shoes and a set of this is 19 toe studs. So thankfully that was available. If that wasn't available, then I don't know how I would have done that. I guess, there's organ supply companies now, but they usually only sell to organ manufacturers that are making lots of organs, and they buy them in bulk, and they're very expensive. So even if there are companies making them, it's still difficult to get parts like this for an organ, unless you have an organ that's being, warranty serviced or something. So it was quite a difficulty to find real organ parts. I also looked into getting actual organ keyboard manuals that were, wooden and had the tracker action in the back and that sort of thing. And it was going to be about $2,000 per keyboard. And I wasn't going to spend that much on a keyboard, so I just said, I'll find keyboards on Amazon, which was also difficult because an organ keyboard is different from a piano keyboard, and that on a piano keyboard the key just goes straight down. It just goes straight down from the end of the key, and then it's like a big block. But on an organ keyboard, it's a waterfall design where it comes out, goes down a little bit, and then goes back in. And so to find a MIDI keyboard that was designed like that, I don't know, it probably took me a few hours of scrolling through Amazon listings to find one, because most everyone just wants a piano keyboard. But I needed this so that, because an organ with multiple manuals, the keys slightly overhang the manual that's below it. And you need to put these thumb pistons in there. So there has to be space for buttons and the wooden board and the wires and an overhang ledge. So in order to get keyboards that fit that, I had to look at all the measurements for these keyboards on Amazon just to find one that would work. And that took, probably an hour or two of scrolling through Amazon listings just to find the keyboard. I mean, there's a lot of specific things involved with the parts of it that, a commercial organ manufacturer, they just get that done once and then they can make multiple models of organ out of it. But I'm just building this, so I had to do all that from scratch, and so it took quite a while. When I was designing the pedal board, originally, so I get the pedal board, all it was what Hammond supplied, which was the pedals and then this backboard and the back box that they attached to, and nothing else. So I had to add on these wooden sides to give it a case and put this piece of wood on the top. And then I also had to make the electronics so that when you press down the pedal, the organ actually knows that you're pressing the pedal down. And most commercial pedal boards will use reed switches or a metal tine that it presses. And so I had to figure out what kind of system I wanted to use for this. Originally, I had come up with this terrible system so on Hammond pedal boards, there's little tines on the back that come down and press switches that are inside of the Hammond organ. But I don't have those Hammond switches, and it only really works right with that kind of switch with the foam on it and that sort of thing. So I had to come up with my own system, which utilized this thick block of piano felt. I also could have used a rubber strip, but it's a thing of piano felt that they press down on so that it doesn't make too much noise. It's still noisier than the average organ pedal board nowadays, but it's not as noisy as it was before. I had originally come up with this concept utilizing those tines, that it would come down and press on a pad of metal foil, and it would make this annoying clicking noise, and it was very bad. So I eventually figured out how to utilize Hall effect sensors, so now on the end of each of those tines there's a little tiny magnet, and that magnet comes down close enough to activate this sensor. It doesn't touch the sensor, it just gets close to it, and the sensor detects that there's a magnetic field. And so that enables you to just press down onto that pad of piano felt rather than pressing onto a piece of metal which goes click. And so you get a much smoother operation, and the actual activation point is just in air. You don't have to touch anything. It's very smooth feeling. So that was one thing. The other thing was programming the swell pedals. The swell pedals, they also did not have any electronics on them, and I had to come up with a system that would send the computer a signal as to how far you've pressed in the pedal. And the original company that had made these swell pedals had some sort of a variable resistor thing where it would change the resistance of the circuit as you push the pedal in based on the amount of light getting into this logarithmic light contraption. It's very odd, and it would produce a logarithmic resistance output, which I just didn't want to deal with. So I made my own system where I actually welded these metal tines onto the back of the metal things that were already on the back of the swell shoes, and 3D printed some parts and got some metal linkages that connect them to slide potentiometers, which are the same kind of slide potentiometers that are used on audio boards for the faders. And so they're rated for a high amount of back and forth, and they're very precise and long. And you need that for this. When you push it in and out, it just moves the slide potentiometer back and forth. And then the microcontroller receives that signal and then converts it to a MIDI control value, which is sent only when you move the pedal, which was something I had to figure out, how to not bombard the system with MIDI signals. So I had to tell it to recognize only when you're moving it. So the wood here is walnut plywood and solid wood that's been stained with a dark finish. It's got, I think this is semi-gloss lacquer. This is gloss, but it basically looks the same. I had built like a couple boxes before this, but they didn't even have finishes on them. So this was my first time doing, fine woodworking and finishing wood in any capacity. So this panel here, this big panel, is a sheet of plywood inside with a basic cutout of this edge here. But then there's solid wood that was cut exactly to that edge and then glued on and then run through a template and cut, and then this design here was routed on with a spinning router bit. Yeah, a lot of people, when you say, "Oh, I play organ," they think Hammond organ, but no, it's a pipe organ, which is a very different beast. My website is www.cameronmcgee.com. That is CAMERONMCGEEHEE.com.